We are back to reading our chapter book, Walk Two Moons by Sharon Creech. And today we're going to actually read two chapters because they're both pretty short. 33 is called The Visitor. So that's what we're going to start with, is chapter 33. And we'll get 34 read too. And we got lots going on. I'm just ready to find some stuff out. How about you? All right, let's go. Chapter 33. Graham and Gramps were both still awake in our frontier cabin on the edge of Yellowstone National Park. "Aren't you sleepy yet?" I said. Graham said, "I don't know what's the matter with me. I don't feel like going to sleep at all. I want to know what happened to Peavy." "I'll tell you about Mr. Berkway's visit, and then I'll stop for tonight." I went over to Phoebe's after dinner on the day Mr. Berkway had read from my journal about the blackberry kisses and from Phoebe's about Miss Cadaver. Ooh. In Phoebe's bedroom, I said, "I've got two important things to tell you." And the doorbell rang, and we heard a familiar voice. "That sounds like Mr. Berkway," Phoebe said. That's one of the things I want to tell you," I said, "about Mr. Berkway." There was a tap on Phoebe's door. Her father said, "Phoebe, could you and Sal come downstairs with me?" I thought Mr. Berkway was going to be mad at Phoebe for what she had written about his sister. The worst thing was that Phoebe didn't even know yet that Miss Cadaver was Mr. Berkway's sister. Remember, we learned that in the last chapter that they're twins, actually. Ah! And she was talking really bad about Miss Cadaver in her journal. I felt like we were lambs being led to slaughter. "Take us," I thought. "Take us and do away with us quickly." We followed Phoebe's father downstairs. There on the sofa was Mr. Berkway, holding Phoebe's journal and looking embarrassed. "That is my own private journal," Phoebe said, "with my own private thoughts." "I know," Mr. Berkway said, "and I want to apologize for reading it aloud." Apologize? Whew! That was a relief. It was so quiet in that room that I could hear the leaves being blown off the trees outside. Mr. Berkway coughed. "I want to explain something," he said. "Miss Cadaver is my sister." "Your sister?" Phoebe said. "And her husband is dead." "I thought so," said Phoebe. "But she didn't murder him," Mr. Berkway said. "Her husband died when a drunk driver rammed into his car. My mother, Mrs. Partridge, was also in that car with Mr. Cadaver. She didn't die, as you know, but she did lose her sight." "Oh," I said. And Phoebe stared at the floor. My sister Margaret was the nurse on duty in the emergency room when they brought in her husband and our mother. Margaret's husband died that night. The whole time Mr. Berkway was talking, Phoebe's father was sitting beside her with his hand resting on her shoulder. It looked like the only thing that was keeping Phoebe from vaporizing into the air and disappearing with his hand resting there. "I just wanted you to know," Mr. Berkway said, "that Mr. Cadaver is not buried in her backyard. I've also just learned about your mother, Phoebe, and I'm sorry she's gone, but I assure you Margaret would not have kidnapped or murdered her." After Mr. Berkway left, Phoebe and I sat on the front porch. Phoebe said, "If Miss Cadaver didn't kidnap or murder my mother, then where is she? What can I do? Where should I look?" "Phoebe," I said, "there's something I gotta tell you. Look, Sal, if you're gonna tell me that she's not coming back, I don't want to hear it. You might as well just go home now. I know who the lunatic is. It's Sergeant Bickle's son." And so we devised a plan. At home that night, all I could think about was Miss Cadaver. I could see her in her white uniform working in the emergency room. I could see an ambulance pulling up with its blue lights flashing and her walking briskly to the swinging doors. And with her wild hair all around her face, I could see the stretchers being wheeled in and I could see Miss Cadaver looking down at them. I could feel her heart thumping like mad as she realized it was her own husband and her own mother lying there. I imagined Miss Cadaver touching her husband's face. It was as if I was walking in her moccasins. That's how much my own heart was pumping and my own hands were sweating. I started wondering if the birds of sadness had built their nest in Miss Cadaver's hair afterwards, and if so, how she ever got rid of them. Her husband dying and her mother being blinded were events that would matter in the course of a lifetime. I saw everyone else going on with their own agendas while Miss Cadaver was frantically trying to keep her husband and her mother alive. Did she regret anything? Did she know the worth of water before the well was dry? All those messages had invaded my brain and affected the way I looked at things. "Are you sleepy yet, Graham?" I asked. My voice was hoarse from talking so much. "No, chickabiddy, but you just go on to sleep. I'm just going to lie here a while and think about things." She nudged Gramps. "You forgot to say that thing about the marriage bed." "Oh," Gramps yawned. "Sorry, Gooseberry." And he patted the bed and he said it. He always says it. Can't believe he would forget. Chapter 34, Old Faithful. The next day was probably one of the best and surely the worst. One of the best and surely the worst in Graham and Gramps' lives. The whispers woke me early. It was the 6th day, and the next day was my mother's birthday. We had to get out of Wyoming and through Montana. Gramps was already up, but Graham was lying on the bed, staring at the ceiling. "Did you ever go to sleep?" I asked. "No," she said. "I didn't feel like sleeping. I can sleep later." She climbed out of bed. "Let's go see that Old Faithful. I've waited my whole entire life to see Old Faithful." "You've sure got your heart set on that, don't you, you stubborn gooseberry," said Gramps. "I sure do," Gramps said. We parked the car and walked up a low hill. I was afraid Graham was going to be disappointed because it didn't look like much at all at first. There was a rope fence around a mound on the side of the hill. The ground was scrabbly dirt, and in the center of the rope enclosure was about 20 feet away was a hole. "Wow, can't we get any closer than this?" Gramps and I walked over to read a sign about Old Faithful. A park ranger rushed past us yelling, "Ma'am! Ma'am! No, ma'am!" "Well, golly," Gramps said. Graham was crawling under the rope. The ranger stopped her. "Ma'am, there is a reason for the rope being there." Graham brushed off her dress. "Well, I just wanted a better look." "Well, don't worry," the ranger said. "You'll get a good look, but you got to stay behind the rope." The sign said that Old Faithful was due to erupt in 15 minutes. And she was about to go over there to the hole. Oh my. Woo! The sign, more and more people gathered around the rope. There were people of all ages. Little babies were crying, grannies were sitting on folding stools, and teenagers were plugged into their radio headsets, and couples were smooching. There were people speaking languages other than English too. And next to us was a tour group of Italians. Across the way was a group of Germans. Graham tapped her fingers together. And she was just getting more and more excited. "Is it time?" she kept saying. "Is it almost time?" She's like a little kid. The crowd became quiet a few minutes before Old Faithful was due to go off. Everyone stared at the hole. Everyone was listening. "Is it time?" Graham said. There was a faint noise and a little spit shot out of the hole. The man next to me said, "Aw, is that all?" Another noise. This time it was louder. A grating and crunching sound like walking on gravel. 2 spitful spits. "Aw," the man said. Then it was like the radiator boiling over or the tea kettle blowing its top off. Old Faithful hissed and steamed and a sudden spout of water shot out and maybe 3 feet high. "Aw," the man said. "Is that all?" Then more steam. boiling and hissing, and a huge jing bang spray of water surged out, climbing and climbing, and then more and more, until it looked like a whole river of water was shooting straight up into the air. It looks like an upside down waterfall, Graham said. All the water there was walloping, hissing, and I could have sworn the ground rumbled and trembled underneath us. The warm mist blew towards us and people started backing away. All except Graham. She stood there grinning and tilting her face up to that mist. I could just see her. And staring at that fountain of water. Oh, and what do you think Graham said? Huzza, huzza. She shouted into the air. Gramps wasn't watching Old Faithful. He was watching Graham. He put his arm around her and hugged her. You like this old geyser, don't you? He said. Oh, yes, I do. Graham said, and the man next to me was staring open-mouthed at Old Faithful. Wow, that's amazing. Gradually, Old Faithful slowed down, and we watched it undo itself and retreat into its hole. We stood there, even after everyone else had drifted away. At last, Graham sighed. Okay, let's go. We were inside the car and about to leave when Graham started to cry. Well, golly, Graham said. What's the matter? Oh, Graham sniffled. Oh, nothing. I'm just so happy I got to see Old Faithful. You old gooseberry, Gramps said, and on we went. We gonna eat up Montana, Gramps said, and we gonna get to the Idaho border tonight. You just watch me, he said. I'm putting this pedal to the metal. He stepped on the gas and peeled out of the parking lot. Idaho, here we come. Okay, so we got finished with 2 chapters today, and we will start chapter 35 next time, called The Plan, and maybe we'll find out, because you remember at the beginning of chapter 34, it said something about it was the best day and the worst day? Well, I didn't think anything bad happened there, so maybe next time we'll find that out. So I will read to you the next time. Check back later. All right, bye.